Hi, my name is Greg Elwell, and I work at the Oklahoma Medical Research Foundation. I'm not a scientist, I work in the Public Affairs Department, and in this issue of Findings, I'll be talking about commercial human genome testing. To do that, I had to donate a genetic sample. But you might be wondering, what exactly is the genome?
The word genome is used to describe all of our genes from one individual, but the entire collection of genes. And of course, those are composed of DNA.
The genome is like an encyclopedia of hereditary information. Everything that makes you physically is on your DNA. If you're trying to imagine what DNA looks like, you know those double helix things they use in science fiction movies? That's it.
The human genome is approximately 3 billion bases.
How big is it actually, or how many genes does it contain?
Our DNA, if we could pull it out into a filament, would be several feet long. Probably, I think around 6 feet, I think is the average, the estimate of it.
You're taking the entire Library of Congress and putting it in something that you can see under a microscope.
So we would have to magnify it millions of times to be able to see it. It'd be that, a spider web would be like a huge cable compared to this. It'd be so tiny.
You might look at this banana and assume that I don't have anything in common with it. I mean, look, it's so thin and healthy. But the truth is, humans share about 50% of our DNA with bananas. And it gets even higher when we start talking about things with brains. Which I guess means that I really could be a monkey's uncle, but that depends on my brother Jerry. And human DNA, yours and mine, 99% identical. 99%. And I bet you don't even look like me. Well, I've got this kit now, and what I have to do is take out this test tube and spit in it. And according to the box, I have to spit into the barcoded tube with the funnel until the amount of liquid saliva reaches the fill line. Then I screw on this big cap that has what they call a buffer liquid in it. And then I screw on a little cap, and then I put it in this envelope here and mail it off. And in about a month, they're going to tell me what I am. A human, banana, one of those lizard monsters from V. Since we'd never done anything like this before, I decided to talk to my wife, Moran, and find out what it was we hoped to find from my genome, and also what we were worried about. Is there anything that you're worried about finding out? Anything that's going to come up that you're going to be displeased or worried about hearing?
Well, obviously I'll be displeased if there's something, wrong or detrimental, but I've met most of your family, and most of them are pretty physically healthy. Not really any diseases that I'm concerned about.
Since DNA comes from your parents, I decided to talk to mine, Harry and Laura Elwell, and find out a little bit more about our genetic family history. What do you guys know about the genome? Just the stuff that I told you?
Yeah.
Okay. When you look at me, do you guys see parts of yourself? Like, Mom, what of Dad do you see in me? And I mean both my personality and my exceedingly good looks.
We used to not think you looked like either of us.
That's true.
But I was sure where you came from, so it wasn't a problem.
No, you are unique. You are, whether or not we can say that, there's just something totally different about you that we weren't aware of where it came from.
Well, you might remember that we sent off a package to 23andMe, and instead of mailing me back a packet of information, I was emailed a web address that tells me all my information. So at this point, you might be wondering what exactly my DNA says about me. Well, I have wet earwax, which I didn't realize was genetic. I also have 2 working copies of the alpha-actinin 3 fast-twitch muscle fiber gene, and I guess that's the same stuff that a lot of Olympic athletes have, so clearly I've wasted that potential. Some bad news, unfortunately, is that I have a 1 in 3 shot of getting prostate cancer, while most people have about a 1 in 4 shot.
Most people, I think, probably take a more deterministic view that you have a gene and you get a disease or you don't. It's not that simple.
One of the things I was surprised to learn was about Lou Gehrig's disease, which I thought I wasn't going to be at any risk for because I've never batted .400 in my life. But according to this, I have 2 cytosine alleles at this specific SNP, which gives me slightly higher odds of ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease.
ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease, is a disease that affects the motor neurons. Now, these are the wires that connect the brain to the spinal cord and the spinal cord to the rest of to your muscles. People who suffer Lou Gehrig's disease lose those wires, and so they become paralyzed. But the vast majority, 80–85% of all ALS cases, are of unknown, what we call unknown etiology. We don't know what the genetic components are or what environmental factors are. They're not purely heritable diseases. They don't run in families. So that makes us think that these people may have had a selectivity or sensitivity to some environmental factor, and then they were exposed to the factor.
And now, in most recent studies, we're trying to find these variations that then are also linked up to a disease, but that confer some increased or decreased risk of a disease. And so that's the situation that you have with this one with Lou Gehrig's disease. Now, the important part of that is that when we look at that, typically we're comparing individuals who have, in your case, the C, or 2 Cs, with individuals who have something else at that position, and then asking what the relative risk of in the 2 populations is of Lou Gehrig's disease.
Genetic testing by its nature gives you a statistical estimate. You don't want a statistical estimate. You don't care about the rest of the population. As far as you're concerned, your relevant population is 1 person, and you don't do statistics on 1 person.
And so it's a valuable piece of information, generally speaking. It's not so valuable for individuals under a couple of circumstances. One, if the relative risk is relatively small, right? So a 30% increased risk. 30% sounds like a lot, but it's only a lot if it's an absolute risk. If my chance were, in my lifetime, were 30% of getting Lou Gehrig's disease, well, that's a substantial risk. But my chance is only something like 1 in 100,000 of getting Lou Gehrig's disease. Now, if that 1 in 100,000 increases by 30%, that means 1.3 in 100,000. So now it's still a pretty trivial risk for me, even though in relative terms it's gone up a lot.
I mean, it's still a little scary, but it's certainly not as scary when you talk about the absolute risk of it, you know?
Because relative risk doesn't help you much with deciding what you're going to do with lifestyle changes, whether to take a medication, whether to have an operation. You know, all the things that might prevent some disease depend really on what the absolute risk is, not the relative risk.
How do we deal psychologically with providing people with possible views of their future? This is almost like going back to the oracle at Delphi with here's a portent of this happens to be a genetic composition, but still it's a portent. It's something to come, but not certainly to come.
But that's part of what I'm learning is that this may tell you what's on your genome, or at least parts of what's on your genome. But the truth is that it's not, I don't know, it's not a lock. It's not absolute. A lot of things are based on the environment. A lot of things are based on personality. And the things that are genetic are not necessarily so ironclad.
But you put your finger on a really good issue here, and that is that I think we've got to be careful that we don't give people information that just upsets them, and there's nothing they can do about it.
My father died when he was 56 of a heart attack. I don't need to know anything more than that. Exercise, watch your diet, be happy in your work, and you'll live as long as the fates decree. I mean, don't worry about it. Unless you have a family history of something, then you may have to do things that checkups more frequently, whatever it takes. But in general, not to worry.
Looking at my genetic information, I found some things that I wasn't too wild about. But the truth is, those things were there before I took the test. And in some cases, it might be better to know. Since starting this whole thing, even before I got my test back, I started going to the gym, I started eating healthier, I've lost a little bit of weight. I can't stop everything that's going to happen to me genetically, but this is my way of controlling it. And sometimes just understanding the information is the best way to make sure that your DNA doesn't have the last say on what happens to you.